Questions?
I would like to know a little bit about the connection between three manifestations of what seem to be like a similar thing. So these are Greek daemons, Buddhist tutelaries, and high yoga tantra, and then the process of identification and interiorization of Catholic saints.
Okay. All right. Good. That's gonna be a workout. Okay. Uh, let's start with what I know most about, which would be the Buddhist tutelaries in Tantra, highest yoga Tantra. There's a practice, and it's not uncommon, of visualizing a deity, which is very hard for. See, in Buddhism, it's kind of under, at least in the Mahayana, at least in the Nyingma tradition of the Mahayana, and especially in the practice of Nandro and practices like that. There's the same way they do mandalas in sand, which is in two dimensions. They also visualize tutelaries or teachers or temporary stand-in saints that temporary is the wrong word, provisional stand-in saints or tutelary is kind of a good word for it. It'd be like a Tara or Manjushri or embodiments of the Buddha, right? So it's understood that the Buddha takes on many manifestations depending on the needs and of the time, the inclinations of the culture. And so in this practice, one visualizes in great detail in one's mind the tutelary, using a sculpture or using a picture or something like that. You train your brain to concentrate and then without that to reconstruct. I mean, I could still do it to some extent. Construct Tara, and you have her in a lotus position, and her hands in a certain mudra, right? And she has a certain beatific face, and how she's dressed and the way her hair is done and all this, and it's memorized in the mind. And so you have this in your mind, and I think I didn't go through this particular part of the guru yoga where you basically let the guru stand in for a saint or for a deity temporarily. It's kind of the same thing as that, where you would have someone like the Dalai Lama or like another High Lama, and they represent, your guru represents to you the manifestation of God on earth for now, right, as you're learning. And then likewise, you could put a lot of energy. I mean, you become very, very positively attached, I guess is the right word, to your guru or to your tutelary. One is an actual living being. The other one is an imagined manifestation of the Buddha. Manjushri, as I mentioned, Tara. Others come to mind. The medicine Buddha. I don't know all the details. And so once these are visualized in the mind, they become very, very strongly cathected. I mean, you really, really love them as best as you can love at that stage of your development. And then, just like those mandalas that get wiped off the floor, those beautiful, have you seen them, those beautiful, big, huge sand mandalas that they do sometimes?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've seen it.
I mean, it's a lot of work. Quite a few people are working on them. And but then they're just wiped off because they're impermanent, and they're a symbol of impermanence, and they're beautiful too, and they're a symbol of that too, or not a symbol, they're a representation of that. Well, in a similar manner, the tutelary, the visualized Buddha or Bodhisattva, probably is more like it. Yeah, Bodhisattva is both assembled in the mind, because in your mind's quite capable of doing all of this actually, and then it's a powerful practice, and then it's dissolved, and then once it's no well before it's dissolved, Well, there's two directions to go, and forgive me, I haven't thought about this in a long, long time. You identify so closely with the attributes or the characteristics of this particular bodhisattva. Let's use Tara because that's the one I know. That you start to take on her character. You try and take on the characteristics, or you don't try. You start. Your practice is to take on the characteristics of this enlightening being. Right? Bodhisattva is another word for enlightening being. And enlightening beings and enlightened beings, those boundaries are very, very fluid, as they should be. And I'm working in English translation, so I'm not fluent in Tibetan, and this is a Tibetan practice, by the way, that I'm speaking of. And so you become identified with them. You start to take on, you aspire to take on their attributes of patience, of kindness, of loving kindness, of compassion, of generosity, of patience, of discipline, but not discipline without the hard edge to it that it has in English. Perseverance and insight, and but mainly love, right? Mainly love. And so it's kind of like you see in India sometimes people get all the really, really into their gurus, right? They start worshiping their gurus and this and that and so on and so forth. Well, in this case, it's done in certain forms of Lamaism in Tibet and in Nepal and other places. There is that identification with your guru, but in addition to that, or in place of that, there's this identification with this visualized bodhisattva. And then as you go about your day, you're realizing that you're acting like this bodhisattva would act, right? This bodhisattva would be kind. This bodhisattva would be patient. This bodhisattva would be insightful and care about things and wise or whatever. And so in the two forces, one in which, and these two may be simultaneous, and actually usually they are, you dissolve the visualization in your mind, right? But you keep the characteristics of the bodhisattva in your own being. And so you've interiorized that, and I'm butchering this. I'm not a Tibetan master. So forgive me, Tibetans. But you take on the characteristics of the tutelary, and the next thing you know, you're going about the world, and you visualize yourself as a bodhisattva of this ilk. And then it starts to generalize, and then you realize the whole thing was just mind, right? Mind. And it's using the mind as a very powerful instrument for both visualization, for interiorization, for learning, and for using the power of love. Because after you spend a few months meditating on one of these tutelaries, you become quite enamored of them, and for good reason. They're beautiful, right? They're beautiful in every sense of the word. They're beautiful human beings. They're beautiful. Not that they're human. They're temporary expedients, I think, is the word they use for them. And so through that process, one absorbs. First, one loves something to the exterior. Then one takes something from the exterior inside. Then that thing that's inside becomes interiorized, and then it becomes you. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to work, right? Something like that. And I'm speaking also from a kind of a psychoanalytic point of view, too. So then we can go to the Catholic saints. It's occurred to me that there's similarities between this and the way that certain Catholic saints are treated in certain parts of, let me say, Latin America, because I probably know that best. And so you find people that are very, very, they pick a saint, and they become identified with that saint, and they have pictures of that saint all over the place. Now, not always. I mean, and there's different levels, right? And many, many thousands of variations. So I'm not speaking, I don't want to generalize too much. But the process by which people identify with a particular saint, there's one saint, what was her name? I'm trying to remember. There was a saint who was the patron saint of the mentally ill. And then there's patron saints of everybody. They have different common saints. Like the surfers had Saint Christopher, I mean, probably auto thieves have a particular saint. You know, the thief of traveler. I mean, the saint of traveling, the saint of people with chronic diseases or something like that. You know, it's infinite, and people, especially if you look at them all, are very, very creative in using these. If you look at some of the art, the folk art in Mexico, you'll see these, and in Brazil, you'll see them mixed with more native religious traditions, or I don't know, more native, but imported from Africa, and so in that way, more native. And you can see them intermixed with Santeria and all kinds of other things. So I'm getting off topic, but basically what I'm trying to point out is that these are very versatile mental objects. Let's call them objects. And as one becomes, and if you read some of the writings of the saints, Catholic saints, well, they weren't saints when they were writing, right? They were saints. They were identified with other saints, all right. And so then they start to take on the attributes of those representations of the love of God, right? And then what happens, or can happen, I should say, is that the person themselves starts to become saintly by interiorization. In psychoanalytic terms, we call it interiorization, introjection of that externally observed saint. And we see this in psychoanalysis, where the patient will start to take on some of the characteristics of the analyst, right? Who's a little bit more objective, a little bit more, hopefully a little more dispassionate, a little bit more circumspect, and a little bit having put things in perspective a bit more, less, you know, histrionic about some conflict. And so, but that process by which the Buddhist student acolyte, you know, identifies with their tutelary, the process by which a devout Catholic, some of them, identify with certain saints, the process by which certain psychoanalytic students, you know, students of psychoanalysis that are in training, I'll just speak to that right now, introject their teachers and their analysts. It seemed to me that was a very interesting commonality across cultures. And then Greek Daimons is the one that's really, really difficult because, man, the adventures and the misadventures in translation are huge when you start to get into here. And the word daimon now has taken on the meaning of demon, which is like completely the opposite of what it may have meant in the past. And I'm no expert on Roman or Greek religiosity, but I suspect they believed, some of them, that they had a spirit guide. And that's another one, the Native American spirit guide. So in Greek, they had a spirit guide of a certain ilk, and this person would, or this spirit guide would help them with major decisions or minor decisions, and help them kind of to look at the world in a certain way. And then, you know, there's all kinds of variations on this. I mean, it could be that this is the guy that determines your fate. I said guy, it could easily be a woman, or not have a gender at all. And it becomes kind of like a spirit that you appeal to for wisdom, someone you appeal to for decisions, and or things much more primitive or much more sublime than that. Do you see? So you know, who knows exactly how it worked for an individual back then? And I'm loath to generalize about something that's so. I mean, it's inherently complex and also infinitely variegated, right? I mean, there's who knows what all the variations are. And so I would say that these four things, the Greeks and their daemons, Daemons, by the way, not demons, the Buddhists and their tutelaries, their Bodhisattva tutelaries, the Catholics and their saints, and the psychoanalysts and their analysand, I would say there's great similarities in the energies that are being used, and the mechanism by which that which is outward becomes inward, and becomes then if it's not totally interiorized, then it just becomes an external guide, right? Follow-up questions. I hope that helps. That's the best I could do at the moment. I never really thought of them, but it occurred to me that they have a lot of parallels. And at this time in our human history, we need to find things that unite our commonalities, and we need to build on our commonalities, not build on our differences. We've had plenty of millennia of that, and I think we've reached the end of that, given the instant communication, instant translation, the dawn of AI, and the weapons that we have, and all. I don't think I need to spell that out at the moment, but I think there's reasons why we should now, thinking men and women from all over the planet should be thinking about, hey, well, what are the real commonalities here? What are the mechanisms here that we share in common? Because I believe that they're much more common than people realize, and that would be very good for us as a species. Okay, so follow up. Sorry, that was a bit long. Go ahead.
No, that was very helpful. The follow up that comes to mind then is this in juxtaposition to mimetic behavior between people and those that they idolize? So, for example, you'll have a pop star as a 15-year-old kid who you just think is wonderful. You think they're kind, giving, they make amazing music or all this stuff, and then you can see it all the time. A teenage kid or even adults do this with pop stars they like. Is that a similar thing, or is that just natural mimetic behavior? What you're talking about sounds more deliberate than that.
Well, there's two parts to it. One is, I think it's important to acknowledge, all of us primates, especially humans, that we're very mimetic creatures. That's a good point. I think it is different somewhat, but it's probably related evolutionarily. So let's talk a little about mimesis. Gerard, what's his name? The French philosopher. I keep thinking of Gerard Depardieu. That's the French actor. There's a French philosopher at Stanford. He was at Stanford. I think he's dead now. And he pointed out how mimetic humans are. That we're like monkey see, monkey do. When we see someone do something, we want to imitate it. Whether it's their car, whether it's their hairstyle, whether it's their hem length, whether it's their, and we see this also, by the way, with prison guards. I was on a case where a lot of children were being kept in an adult prison, and then when I interviewed them, when they grew up, they wanted to be. This was in America, by the way. It's kind of sad. They wanted to be prison guards, so they've identified with. Well, some of that could be Stockholm syndrome, like Patty Hearst, where you identify with the person who's perceived to have the power over you, or something like that. But in the pathological, you can also find the mechanisms that are also more common than not. So if we look at monkeys, they imitate each other all the time. Monkey see, monkey do, right? Humans are the same way. So we have that feature in us. That's true. I think that this would be more conscious, and it'd be more elaborated, and it would be more sustained. And it's also not the mimesis of adolescence, in which they imitate each other. I remember, wanting more than anything else to have a Beatle cut, like the Beatles back when I was a kid. And they wouldn't let us have it, so that made it even more. That made it even more desirable. So yeah, there is that. That's an interesting. I hadn't thought about those two together, frankly. And so let me think about that, and you think about it, and maybe we'll come up with something where there may be an underlying. See, we want to mobilize what we've got. We have to work with what we have. That's working with reality on this planet, and the reality of being an animal, a physical being. And so we have drives, and we have hungers, and we have peculiarities, right? Like you look at the birds, like the peacocks, for example, or even the cardinals or the blue jays. They get all gussied up, right, to impress the other, right? I mean, it's very hard to explain the tail of a peacock, except for it's like to impress the girls. So there are these features in us, and it would behoove us to study them and apply them to improving ourselves, right? Defeating the ones or mobilizing them, transmuting a weakness, let's say something like mimesis, into a strength, because what we decide to mime, or mime is the wrong word, if you're going to imitate something anyway, why not imitate Jesus, right? Do you see what I'm saying? So I don't know about that, but that's should be a very fruitful thing to think about. Great question. Any more follow-ups? Okay, wow, this is
not on this specifically.
Rene Girard, right? He's the contemporary theoretician who specializes in that, and an influential guy, by the way. Okay, here we go. Whew. I gave my cortex a workout. Okay. Question.
Throughout Idris Shah's corpus, he refers to this thing called what he calls the attention factor, which is basically multiple aspects of a desire for attention or a need to extend attention. Could you talk about this a little bit?
Okay, well, first thing, I don't want to lose this free association that just came to, which is that the evolutionary value of attention factor. So and he doesn't address that, but let's, if you don't mind, try and remind me of that after this, okay?
Yeah.
So what Idris Shah pointed out, and it was a surprise to me, even though I'd studied psychology in the West for longer than I care to admit, that attention is a human need, the way food and sleep are human needs, and that people that are deprived of attention will seek attention, however they can. And at the time, what it explained was some of the attention-seeking behavior of adolescents, right? Who, they'll I don't want to say anything because now they're common, the piercings and the tattoos and the funny clothes and all that other stuff. But at the time, those were much less common, and they were used to make sure that people noticed them, right? Especially kids who weren't noticed very much growing up, or didn't have an environment where they could be noticed. And so what happens is that kids need attention. They're going to get it one way or the other. If you don't give them quality attention, they'll go for garbage attention, right? They'll go in the garbage bin to get attention. They'll do whatever they need to do. They'll start robbing stores or setting fires or things like that to get attention. Because if they don't get attention, they wither, they die, right? And that's why we use solitary confinement as a punishment. It's very painful for the human to have no human interaction. Unless there's, some other kind of mental condition, schizoid personality or something like that, or some kind of other problem. But in general, people need attention. Students need attention, and you'll see this if you go to any large lecture and you ask for questions. Some people are going to stand up because they want the attention. They've been sitting there for 2 hours and they want some attention, right? And once you start to notice this, you'll see it everywhere. And so this common thing that teachers and parents are always complaining about, oh, you're just trying to get attention. Well, yeah, the kid is trying to get attention because he needs attention. And sometimes I wondered, I was writing a book once called Scatterbrained Nation, and it was about how scatterbrained we were. This was way back before social media stuff. And in that book, I wondered whether or not it was attention. Did children have attention deficit disorder, or did they have a deficit of attention disorder? And to this day, you have to think about it before you can answer that for any given child. But an interesting corollary question would be, what's going to be the role of AI? And can AI satisfy this attention need? Not social media, because there's another human being on the other end, but can an AI satisfy attention needs? I can tell you right now, Alexa certainly can't, and Google Assistant can't. But these more sophisticated, in the movie Her, it'll be interesting to see, will that work, and should it work, or should we allow it to work, or how are we going to protect ourselves if it works too well, or do we need to protect ourselves? There's a whole bunch of open questions here. And so, you know how we talk about AI's creating new jobs? Well, this will be one. The psychologist of the AI human interaction. That's going to be, I think, very vital. Otherwise, we're going to die on the vine, potentially. Now, getting back to that evolutionary thing, well, it kind of makes sense because without attention, you can't learn anything. Without attention, you could be abandoned by a herd. I mean, you can learn a few things, but what are you going to learn on your own? You gotta have human interaction to learn, right? Especially as a young child. And so it could be that it's a very adaptive thing, this attention-seeking behavior in an evolutionary sense. And I think that we've looked at it as a binary. I can't tell. Everybody now says they have ADHD. They don't have ADHD. Their brains have been habituated recently for the last few years to rapid amounts of high stimulation juice, right? They're being juiced by lots of stimulation presented rapidly. And so the brain, which is a very sensitive organ and a very adaptive organ, adapts. And so it goes, okay, well, this is what I'm dealing with, and so this is what I'm used to. And people like what they're used to. They think they know what they like, but they like what they know, and the brain is like that as well. So if your brain is used to high bit rate stimulation, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just trying to describe it here as a dispassionate observer. If it's used to a certain bit rate coming in, and it's used to, have you noticed movies have gotten more and more? I sound like an old man. It's so funny because in the old days they talked about this. They talked about this in the 50s. They talked about it in the 60s and 70s. The movies they're turning up the dial on violence, on nudity, on just spills and chills. I mean, in the old days you saw one car wreck and it'd be Now they go down the freeway, they hit 50 cars, they flip a semi truck, then they hit a tractor, and then a plane comes and lands on the freeway, and then a Terminator comes out, and then it keeps going. I mean, it's all action. But the brain is habituated to that, and they have to keep turning up the dial. Now, there's an end to that eventually, right? I'm not saying we're there yet, but the question is, now that the brain is habituated to that, that doesn't mean you have a disorder of your brain. Your brain is working fine, but you've been habituated. You've developed a tolerance, and not only a tolerance, a liking for high stimulation, right? I mean, Instagram, boom, 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 or X, or TikTok, do, boom, 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 boom. Well, that's easily fixed. You don't need medications to fix that. You need to treat it like you would any other habituation of the brain, right, or habituation of the body, which is a separate subject, and I haven't thought too much about that, but and other people can think about that as well, but it's not ADHD. ADHD is a defective brain wiring and chemistry or something like that, primarily the frontal cortex, so they say. So thank you for letting me give that little thing on ADHD. I mean, the misuse of the word ADHD.
Does that address, that seems to go to the other side of attention that Shaw sometimes talked about, which is extension of attention. He doesn't just only talk about it as needing attention, but also a need to extend attention.
Oh, really? Read that part.
Oh, this is in... Actually, if I get my Learning How to Learn copy, I haven't read this in a little bit of time, because usually it's described as desire, but one second.
There is extension, but it's not at a level that most people understand, or that can be talked about usually, commonly, but maybe I missed something.
Here we go. I hope it's in Learning How to Learn. Thankfully, we have tables of contents.
In that book, maybe. Did he put a table of contents in Learning How to Learn?
Well, it could be just the fact. It could be the fact that I have the Idris Shah Foundation copy instead of the original.
Oof. I hope they don't add things or subtract things. I don't think they would. Sometimes he puts table of contents, sometimes he doesn't. Well, if it's learning how to learn, it's an introductory book, and so probably because people they're habituated to table of contents. He put a table of contents in because he knew that the people who are habituated to that are going to get totally turned off in the beginning before they even start if they don't see a table of contents, right?
Yeah.
It's another mind habit. It's just a habit, right? Somebody should do. There's a couple of doctoral theses in here at least. People should think about it. Not that that matters anymore. I don't know what matters anymore in school.
Um, well, one thing, I know it's in here somewhere. There's at least this one.
You can get back to me on X. You can just
Yeah.
put it on X or something. Let's take a look at it. No rush here.
Yeah, I'll find it sometime. I saw a couple about it, but I'm talking about the actual desire to extend, which I haven't found.
All right.
I'll find it.
That'd be interesting. You ready for another one?
Yes.
Question.
You posted a quote from Hadrat Ali recently that was striking to me.
Love me some Hadrat Ali, let me tell you. Hadrat Ali was a son-in-law of the Prophet, by the way, folks, and he was a brilliant guy and a stand-up, solid, wise person of the highest order. Some of these old dudes are like amazing. And it takes a little bit to get used to the fact that you're dealing with a different time and a different culture, but the wisdom is the same. And so I recommend him highly, very highly. Hadrat Ali. There's a book called I think it's The Wisdom of Hadrat Ali. No, what's the name of it? No, it's called
Living and Dying with
yeah,
Grace.
living and dying with grace. Okay, so both of those are important. Living with grace, dying with grace. Those are both very important. By Hadrat Ali, translated by an illuminate of the very highest order, also Thomas Cleary. So to have these two together is like so rare as to be. It's vanishingly rare to have a translator who's also a master at this level, right? So now we have so it doesn't get any better than that on this planet, and it's in English. Okay.
Hadrat Ali says, one who keeps his innermost thoughts secret has the choice in his own hand.
Yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. But one who has his innermost thoughts secret, keeps it secret, has a choice in his own hand. It's his choice. Right?
Well, so when I read that over the next like day or so, multiple interpretations came to mind.
Okay, if they're not too personal, maybe they'd be helpful to others.
No, they're not too personal. Well, the first one was more conniving, almost, where you see this as a sort of art of war or something like that.
Well, there are wars, and you do want to win them, and you don't want to kill any more people than are necessary. You don't want any more necessary death than possible, so maybe it is a good idea to keep your mouth shut sometimes.
Right, yeah, keeping what you actually think to yourself.
Right.
In certain circumstances.
Yeah, and military men do this all the time. Absolutely. We have entire secret services devoted to this. I mean, it could be used for well. It could be used well, or it could be used poorly. It could be used for good. It could be used for evil. But it's power, right? You have the choice in your own hand. Nobody else has the choice of your, if they don't know what you're really thinking.
Yeah, the other adjacent interpretation was that if you keep the thought to yourself secret, you haven't committed yourself to any particular path. So
Correct. And in the case of a war, that's very valuable. You don't lose your troops. They can't anticipate where you're going to be next or what you're going to do next, right? So, I mean, I don't want to use a militaristic interpretation. That was, what came up, but yeah, in whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Now these are for grown-ups. Sorry, these are not. This is not wisdom for children. That are still growing up or whatever. These are not for playing around. This is the real serious deal. Living and dying with grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
then I looked up secret because in my mind, secret, which is the conventional definition that you get from modern dictionaries, is secret from others. So that would be kind of like the interpretations that we just mentioned. But then when I looked at the etymology of secret, it was generally not known to man or not understood or something or like that.
Okay.
As opposed to specifically from others. And that made me think, if the innermost thoughts are secret, not even known to yourself, so the quieter the thought, they get quieter and quieter and quieter. And I've noticed that as my innermost thoughts become much, much quieter, there's more space in between them, mm-hmm. I have seemingly more, latitude of action, of choice maybe, in my life. But that also seems wrong because I don't think you'd want your innermost thoughts secret to you, because then they might be ruling you without you knowing that.
Well, you're assuming that it's thoughts. Right. What about secret? Another way of looking at secret is secret knowledge. Knowledge that is kept from the general population because they would hurt themselves with it. In Zen, I think it's Zen or is it Taoism? They talk about if you play around with the master's knife, the master carver, the master the master of knives, right? If you play around with his knives, you're going to cut your hands, right? I think they talk about carvers, right?
That's in the Tao Te Ching, yeah.
Okay, that's Tao Te Ching. So have you ever seen the knives of a master carver? They're really incredible. They're really incredible. Right. Okay. So, but a master carver, his knives are amazing. They're very, very sharp for one thing, and they have strange shapes. Anyway, you play around with those, you'll cut yourself because you don't know what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, secret may refer to thoughts, but it could also refer to knowledge. Just to throw something else in there. But it's a very rich quote. Can you see that? So you contemplate that, and you keep it in the back of your head, and you keep it there for the rest of your life. And you never know when that might be useful. And if it's not useful, get rid of it, right? I mean, don't apply it. But remember that it's not just thoughts that are secret, it's also there's secret knowledge. Mm-hmm. There's no way around that. And a lot of things that were secret are not secret anymore, and for ill and for good. And in terms of ideas and thoughts like that, because of instant global communication, that's a brand new thing on this planet. And these cultures, Greek, Chinese, Buddhist, Catholic, Western, basically agnostic or atheist, psychoanalytic, these things were isolated completely from each other up until very recently. There's no way for anybody to know any of this other stuff. And so, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Well, I think it's a good thing for the most part. But then, if cultures that are doing fine start adopting very maladaptive behaviors from Hollywood or Bollywood or the new Korean cinema or whatever, right? Then maybe it's not so good. We need to be thinking and watching. That's all. Right? Watch out for ourselves. Watch out for our each other as a species. No? Okay, that's a good one. Anything more on that?
Not on that one.
Okay. Another question? before we stop?
There are a few Tao Te Ching passages, but let's just do one.
Love the Tao Te Ching, man. Love that thing. Woo-wee. Bang for buck, man. Nothing comes close. And I like it because it's not a religion, not a philosophy, it's not telling you what to do. It's just telling you how to be smarter about whatever you're doing, right? I love it. And then in the inner understanding of it is the same, is as deep as any Buddhist or other, any. It's like the root, right? It's really quite extraordinary. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm going to plug it again. I'm sorry. I got to plug it again. And now we have a beautiful translation in English. And this book is most of it's the Changsu. You don't have to concern yourself with the Changsu, but just the first 80 pages like this. This is all you need right there. Almost nothing. The Essential Tao, translated by Thomas Cleary. You'll thank me later. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, everybody else gets to do commercials, right? Why can't I do one for a deceased translator who couldn't care less about money, didn't care about money in his life, and he certainly doesn't care now. But yeah, whatever. Okay, go ahead.
Number 66, page 51.
All right.
From that copy.
May I read it?
Yes, please.
Rivers and seas are lords of the 100 valleys. The reason why rivers and seas can be lords of the 100 valleys is that they lower themselves to them well. Therefore, they can be lords to the 100 valleys. So when sages wish to rise above people, they lower themselves to them in their speech. When they want to precede people, they go after them in status. So when sages rule, people don't take it gravely. And when sages are in the forefront, people don't attack them. Therefore, the world happily backs them and does not tire of them, because they do not contend. No one in the world can contend with them. That's pretty Taoist. Okay? What's the question?
Well, the question...
Do you see how many... I just can't help noticing. Do you see all the similarities between Christianity here? Christianity, which is not going to occur for 1,000 years, or not 1,000 years.
Those who go last shall be first.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah. Or then you can also see Mahatma Gandhi, another person that people look up to, some people look up to, where he talks about, something about leading his people, but he was behind them, right? He was running to catch up with them or something like that. So he understood that as well, but keep going. What's the question?
That comes through in certain lines, like when sages want to precede people, they go after them in status. A couple of the lines are a little harder for me to penetrate. Like, when sages rule, people don't take it gravely.
Yeah.
What is like the rule of sages?
Well, sometimes sages would rule. I mean, they would have to be, the ruler. They'd have to be the person that's like making decisions and saying, hey, this is how we're going to have to do things and organize ourselves. It's a wise ruler. Now, we don't hear about them much in history because they don't shed a lot of blood. They don't cause a lot of wars. Usually, they quietly prevent a war, or so. I don't know. Can you think who would be the wisest ruler that you can think of in history?
The wisest ruler I could think of in history.
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius comes to mind.
Oh, well, yeah, Marcus Aurelius does come to mind.
I don't think his people minded him that much. His son may have killed him, but his son was trying to get there, right? He was trying to take what he had, right? To take the. Isn't that what happened to Marcus Aurelius? Or have I got him mixed up with somebody else?
No, I think that's Titus or something. His son poisoned him or something.
Yeah. So, but the people were fine with him. And there's emperors in China, and I mean, think of wise rulers.
I think you wouldn't. Well, no, this is just coming out of my mouth without me thinking about it. But
You probably wouldn't know them because they're not going to promote
yeah,
themselves, and they're not going to do things. They're going to get them in what gets you in history books is some dramatic this or that. You
yeah,
saved a bunch of people, you burned down a village, you fiddled while Rome burned, you started a war, you ended a war, you presided over a
right.
civil war, and the sage leaders, you're not going to hear about them. They'll prevent a war, and they won't tell anybody. Well, I just prevented a war. Okay, I prevented a war. I allow a war to be prevented, something like that. And so that I think that's what that's about. Now, go on though. Say more.
No, that makes sense to me.
Okay, good. You want to do? Let's tip fate and do one more Taoist one.
Okay.
Just give me the quote though, so we don't. I won't read the whole thing.
Yeah. Um,
Notice how also stay low to the ground. The Taoists they stay low to the ground. Very wise counsel. But keep going.
oh, here's this one because it's the first couplet that I was interested in. 72. When the people are not awed by authority. When the people are not awed by authority, then great authority is attained.
Boom.
Um,
Let me just say it out loud in case the sound's not good. When the people are not awed by great authority, then great authority is attained. Is that correct?
mm-hmm.
Okay, next line.
Their homes are not small to them, their livelihood not tiresome.
Their homes are not small to them, their livelihoods are not tiresome.
Just because they do not tire of it, it is not tiresome to them.
Right. What's the question?
About that first couplet, when the people are not awed by authority,
Mm-hmm.
then great authority is attained. Great authority is attained? What is being attained?
Well, in the next lines, they talk about people like living simple lives and doing their work and not getting too worked up about it, and
Right.
they're not resenting their lives. Right? Have you ever known people that don't resent their lives?
Yeah.
They're more common. I notice they're more common in Mexico than they are on this side of the river, right? And it's that they're just ordinary people, simple people that are living a simple life, and they're loving their families, they're loving their animals and their little piece of the world, and there's a very rich life there, and embedded in this beauty, embedded in this stupendous earth, right? Close to it. And so, what need do they have to be awed by authority? They just do what they do. Or read the line again. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. What's the first part?
Well, that makes sense to me, but I wouldn't call... So, when the people are not awed by authority.
Right.
That to me is like, they don't... Well, awed by authority is what a lot of people do with presidents or with other, quote, great figures that they aspire to or bend the knee to, or...
Yeah, that's all about. That's kind of like headed. It's all pointed in the wrong direction.
Right.
Because ultimately, the authority is human too, just like everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at these great leaders, almost invariably, aren't they going to just kind of be like normal people? Yeah. I mean, they have an unnatural job, a huge responsibility to be a leader, all this and that. But that's their problem, and the rest of the people, if they're not slavishly obedient to what's the word I'm thinking of specifically? In Japan, what do you call a samurai lord? What were they referred to as? In Arabia, you have a tribe, right? And the tribe is It's not led by some guy with billions of dollars and all kinds of gold and all this other stuff. He's just another guy on a camel with you in the caravan.
A daimyo?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know exactly. But the point is that when authority starts gussing itself up, it's all dressed up in fancy, walls of metals here, and you got gold everywhere, and you got to be carried on a palimpsest, and you go with this complex crown and all this crazy stuff. That's not headed in the right direction. That's the opposite direction of sanity.
So yes, but then when people are not awed by that,
right?
Great authority is attained.
Yeah, the authority is God, right? The authority is truth. The authority is reality. The authority is nature.
Okay.
All of those things are the same thing, right? All of those are the same wisdom, the same intelligence, the same supreme creativity. And so that authority is the only one we should really be concerned with. That's the only one that matters. Think about it. You're going to die, right? You're going to live a life, short human life, and you're going to die. And meanwhile, you're on this earth for a reason, and this earth is quite sufficient for all of us. It's certainly for any individual. And that's the authority. That's the authority. Not something, what Jesus said, render to Caesar what's Caesar's. And so the common man lives a life, much more in tune with the spirit, right? Which is what Jesus recommended. I mean, which every wise man would recommend. Hey, pay attention to your spirit, not to your, how many amulets, how many gold stars, or how many medals, or how many, it's so disgusting when you see these grown men and they're giving medals to each other. It's like they put a medal around one guy, and then he turns around and puts a medal on the other guy, and they act like that's a serious thing. It's hilarious. It's like, if it wasn't sad, it'd be hilarious. So
that makes more sense to me, yeah.
Okay, so the authority, the final authority is truth. Everything else is just, basically kind of a game, because there's no authority, no human authority is going to tell you when you're going to live or die. They may think they're saying that, but they're not. They can't. It's not in their power. And so I think that's all that's referring to.
Okay.
It's hard though, because it's so quiet. People read the Tao and they laugh at it. They go, "That's ridiculous. You're saying the same thing over and over, and it's boring." Right? Yeah. But okay, it speaks to some, and that's all we need is I don't know. The more the better, in a way. Okay, all right. Anything else before we stop, sir?
No, that's okay. This has been a big one.
Okay, good. Take good care.
You too.